Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I am filming the final video in this trilogy of best, disappointing and worst reads of 2022, and I am lucky enough that actually there is sunshine outside. So today is a good day. I put them in order, although, just don't pay too much attention about the order. All of these books I really disliked. And I just want to do a quick premise with these because some of these books are very unpopular opinion. I'm just gonna say it right there. I'm gonna actually start with a very unpopular opinion. The only books that I've named a crime against society are gonna be the top 3, so the most disliked books of the year, and those ones I honestly think they are crime against society, but all the others I do realize that they didn't work for me. They might work for other people, so this is my truth, this is the reality of my experience with these books, which was unfortunately very negative. It doesn't mean that this is your truth or your reality. Yes, I might sound quite judgmental when describing them. This is just, again, the reality I live, so this is just my point of view, and please don't feel judged if my tone can be quite aggressive sometimes when speaking about books I don't like. I'm not judging you, I'm judging the book. And so if you like a book that I'm judging harshly, it still doesn't mean that I'm judging you, if it makes sense. So at number 10 I have the most unpopular opinion I had all year, and if you've been following me probably you know what's coming, but if you're new, I would love for you to subscribe, by the way, just pointing at that. But at number 10 I have this stunning book-wise, aesthetic-wise, Babel. I really don't pay much attention about new releases, but this one, because I love Kwang previous trilogy so much, definitely when I knew she was gonna come up with a Dark Academia book, I was so hyped for it. I picked this up and read this immediately as soon as I received it in my adult favorite book box. He had a cover, but I just prefer this just so much how it looks like, and I probably struggle to recount the synopsis of this, apart from this is about a bunch of scholars that are accepted in this very difficult program where they have to translate and use words, because words in this world they live in have powers, and so you follow basically these 4 academics. Is it 4? I think it's 4. From the end pages it's 4 of them trying to navigate this very difficult academic environment. It's kind of historical fantasy if you want. It takes place in colonialism time, if I'm correct. It's been a while and I kind of hated it so much that I just forgot a lot of what it was inside. So why did I really hated this? It's not like I was disappointed, it kind of was worse than that. But I honestly actively disliked the experience of going through this book, and I wanted to DNF it so much. So that's why he earned 10 place, because I know that objectively this is not badly written. She's a very talented writer, and I understand why a lot of people liked what she did with this book and how she was denunciating a lot of injustice that were of the time. And I, though, was expecting something completely different, and I think first of all she integrates magic in this that I found very useless. I think she had written like a historical fiction only without trying to integrate in this very complex magic thing. I would probably have appreciated this more. I thought that it was ridiculous, like the fact that you've got this translation, these powers and these kind of objects that create power. I thought it was just bullshit. I'll be really honest, I really didn't like that. It just didn't work for me. And also I didn't like how all these 4 characters are here to do is to make a statement, because all of them are from different races. Characterization was just basically a social commentary about the injustice that were going on in colonialism time. And if she had written either a non-fiction, for example explaining the meanings, all of these amazing words that she put in these, I found that very fascinating, the fact that she told us the origin of certain words. I would have loved to read a non-fiction like that. Or if she had done like historical fiction with clearly saying the synopsis, this is a historical fiction and I'm gonna explore, the injustice of colonialism and, the racism and everything that was going on at the time, I would have probably really appreciated it because I knew what was going on. But if I go into, this is a Dark Academia with magic, and this is like the magic is just there to make a social comment, and it just found me unprepared for what reality of this was. Ridiculous magic, and I didn't like the characters because I thought that they didn't have layers as human beings. They were just a representation of injustice done to their races. So I would have loved if she had just delved into different genres, either historical fiction, non-fiction, and make an argument. Love that. I was completely going in thinking it was completely something different, and yeah, disappointed, to say the least. I think I gave it 2 stars. I will pick up more about her. I'm 100%. I still love her as an author. I still enjoy the writing. It didn't work for me, this one, I'm sorry. At number 9, we have Crossbones Yards. This is the start of a kind of thriller series where you follow the psychologist that helps the police solving crimes. And when I read this one, because again, you might not know if you're new, but I've studied forensic psychology and I wanna, eventually, get a doctorate in psychology and so on. And basically I was very intrigued because I imagined kind of a Jodie Foster situation in, The Silence of the Lambs. So I was very intrigued until I actually picked up this book, and it was shit. Like, it was ridiculous. Like, this woman, first of all, the amount of bodies she stumbles on just by mistake is a bit worrisome. Like, the amount of freedom that she's given by the police, and this takes place in London, so in the UK, is absolutely unbelievable. It's not truth to life. That's not how psychologists would work with police forces. I struggle to suspend belief in that. And also, like, the amount of time that this woman opens her door and then horrible things happen, and all the time she opens the door she gets beaten up, and she keeps opening the door without checking who it is, just got on my nerves, to a point that I thought this was absolutely ridiculous. I didn't mind necessarily the whodunit. I think that was the best part of it, but I just can't stand her. The way this psychologist behaves, she needs therapy. She's not the therapist. Like, she really needs some strong therapy. And so ultimately, overall, I loathed her so much, and I honestly thought it was poorly written, that it deserved a place on this list. And I understand that, people might like the mystery part of this, but how can you just overlook that all the rest is shit, like it's shit done. It's not good writing, it's not a good character, it's an unbelievable character. It's not even like just an unlikable character, it's an unlikable character that acts and does things that make no sense, but then we have to think that what she does makes sense. So she's not like an unbelievable character that makes crazy choices, but we know that, she's a bit weird, and so we go along with it. The author wants us to convince that she's a professional, she knows she's got her shit together, which she clearly doesn't have. At number 8, I've got a book that I forgot most of it already, but this is The Graveyard Apartment, and I did this reading challenge in 2021 where I was reading 10 Japanese horror books, translated of course in English, because unfortunately I can't read Japanese, which I would love to, but I can't. And so this was the last one, and I ended up just having to carry on that challenge in 2022 and finishing in probably February, if I'm not mistaken. The premise of this book is basically you got this family that finds a cheap apartment in these brand new or semi brand new apartments. They are quite big in terms of square meters. So they found this big cheap apartment and they say, oh, that's perfect, let's move in. And then they found out that when they get in, weird stuff are happening in this building block, and a lot of people are actually leaving because this block of flats is resting just on top of a cemetery. So this started very strong because I do like the idea of like a haunted house. It's something that really works for me as a formula in my horror. Unfortunately, this didn't go anywhere. So apart from someone exploding at some point, that was cool, all the rest was very uneventful, was very slow, and it seemed like the build-up didn't pay off in the end because we're not given clear answers, and I don't believe there is a sequel of this. But also, it wasn't like scary, like a lot of sinister things were happening, but then nothing came out of it. No explanation, no big, last scene, nothing. There is no big monster, there is no big ending, like it's nothing. Yeah, just very flat. I probably gave it 1.5 stars. I don't get it. It was kind of a bit famous for a while back then, but I don't get it, guys. At number 7 we have Crave, which is a book I don't remember literally anything about. This is a vampire book though, and it felt like a lot of people describe this as Twilight, just if Bella had a bit of spite, like if Bella had a character. And I think that is what I remember. I think, yes, this was very similar to Twilight, but the main protagonist, I listened to this on audiobook, she had a personality, which I appreciated. However, ultimately, this was just something that, because again I had read Twilight back in the days, didn't provide me nothing new, was very meh to a point that I honestly can't tell you one, maybe I can tell you one scene from the book, and all the rest I forgot completely. So it felt just so flat for something that was apparently very famous. Like, it just didn't stick with me in a way that, you know, I might not enjoy a book, and that's fine, but I don't forget books. Like, it's very rare for me to be unable to tell you what happened, or to remember or recollect the characters, or like something of a book, and I can't tell you anything about this book. It was just like, you know, listening in and coming out. And so I had to put this on the list. Also, like, I think, why would you do like a Twilight retelling? Like, why not creating something new? What is the point of having exactly like a carbon copy of Twilight? I don't know. This is just me putting out there. I understand that a lot of people love this, was very famous, and that's okay. I just literally put this on this list because when I was looking at this, it was like, I remember all the other 112 books I've read this year. This one I can't. So it must have been bad. Actually, a book that I'm not going to discuss in any details apart from, this is an Italian book. It's called Novità, Sottile, and this is a non-fiction about this author basically writing love letters to her friends that helped her while she was dealing and battling anorexia. And while I was expecting from, again, a synopsis, to get her own lived experience of the illness, I instead just got letters to her friends that felt very private, like they were inside jokes, things that they were explained blandly, but ultimately only her friends would have understood. And I got the message of the importance of having people in your life when you're struggling. I don't know, I think she could have done both. She could have, you know, maybe put every chapter a letter to a friend, but at the same time recounting her lived experience of it. At least me not being her friend and me just, you know, wanting to read a non-fiction about this horrible illness, I could have gotten something out of it. We're starting to get into, I really hate those books. Speaking of books that promised to do something and didn't deliver, and were actually social commentary, and we have Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson, and it's again beautiful book. Like, these, they look amazing, and I will probably get rid of these. I just don't need to keep this. My heart is a bit crying though because it looks stunning. And the premise of this is that apparently, from the premise, it's about this bunch of witches that work for the crown in England, and they are this secret society, kind of a MI6, and they need to protect the kingdom from magic threats. And you kind of have witches that work for, you know, the Majesty, and they are part of this secret society, and then you got witches that have decided to leave behind this job and just try and live a normal life. And what happens actually in this book is that you got this witch. All of a sudden she appears and she has horrible powers. So she's very powerful and she's a very young witch. And they found out that this witch she was born as a boy. So she's a trans witch, and these people that work for, you know, the Majesty don't accept her as a witch. They say, you know, only women, biological women, can be witches. So they don't want to accept this trans witch, and they think she's just a demon, basically. While the other witches will take her side and, you know, will advocate for her to just actually be a proper witch and be recognized as a witch and not a demon and not malignant, not the evil force in this. Kind of, I'm just gonna leave it at that. So the premise that I told you, the initial one about, you know, oh, a bunch of witches defending the crown from magic threats, and there is this major threat coming, evil is gonna, you know, devastate the kingdom and take over, so these witches have to fight this off. This was the official premise that you read from here. The real premise is there is no horrible curse, there is no like doom to the kingdom, anything of the sort. There's just this witch that's a trans witch, that she has powers and she's not accepted by the official coven, and so this other coven of, you know, people that witches that have left, they basically want to advocate for her. That is the whole plot. There is no horrible threat, there is no bad guy in this, there is no evil, major evil coming, there is no apocalypse scenario that was promised. And I think this again was a social commentary about accepting this witch. Fair enough if you had told me the real synopsis, like I told you basically right now. If you tell me this is a book about doomsday coming and only witches can save the crown and the kingdom, and then turns out that there is no doomsday, there is just a poor witch wanting to be accepted, and that's all the plot revolves around, that's very different. That's not doomsday. That is a social commentary, which is fine, but it's not what I've been promised. And also, to top it all off, we've got these witches fighting for this, young witch to be accepted, and then they get in this shop that's managed by East European guy, and these witches, they are all about, fighting for the freedom and, for the right of this witch to be considered a witch and not this evil. They are racist. They just see this guy behind the counter, they see that he's from East Europe, oh, he's got to deal drugs in the bag. And it's just like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, are you kidding me? Like, you made me read 450 pages of a social commentary that, to be fair, that's not what was promised to me, because I was just expecting, like, witches fighting the devil. Not delivered. And then these witches, they should be so progressive, they should be so accepting, they are racist. And that kind of prejudice? This guy was just serving ice cream. Like, this guy didn't do anything shady to deserve that comment. It's like, fuck that. Like, I wanted to burn this. I was like, no, I hate this. That was the adult, and this you're about to see, it's the YA of the month for Fairloot. Really missed the mark for me. And now I didn't put this as Crime Against Society because then there is an audience for those books. It definitely wasn't me, but I really hated Majesty, Royal Coven, and the one you're about to see. And this is This Vicious Grace. This in particular probably really got on my nerves, also because it takes place in an island, in an Italian island. So I think the author traveled in Italy. She fell in love with an island, and I guess it's Capri, but it might be Ischia or something of the sort. It might be Sicily. I don't know the island. She never tells me. It does sound like Capri though, and she basically, made a fantasy out of it, a YA fantasy. The protagonist of this, she's called Finestra. Let's not listen. The Italian language is used technically correctly, but completely out of context in the majority of cases. So that irked me very much the wrong way. Fair enough, I'm Italian, so, it does make sense. That's a very personal thing that, you probably, if you're not from Italy, it wouldn't bother you so much. To me, it was bothersome, the way she used it, out of context. For example, she, the protagonist, Alessa, which is not really an Italian name that is in use anymore. Anyway, Alessa, she's also called the Finestra. The Finestra means window. We translate as the window, the window? Yeah, the window you just, you got in your room, the window. So she's called Window. And she's kind of this religious figure because she's this girl that will eventually partner up with someone, and that partner is gonna basically enhance her powers, so she will be able to defend this island from this magic threat that every 30 years comes. And every 30 years, this Finestra, with the help of a partner, will, manages to keep this evil threat at bay. And this time though, Alessa, she ends up always killing her partner. So, when she touches the partner, trying to absorb their powers, to then enhance her powers, she ends up always killing them eventually. Yeah, they're in trouble because this evil thing is coming. Now, the evil thing, guys, is book suicide again. Maybe they got offended because I really talked bad about them. Anyway, so this evil threat is still okay. This evil threat, this doomsday coming, it's beetles. So every 30 years, a bunch of evil beetles that have really sharp pincers come, and they need a whole religious order to fight them. And I can't, guys. Like, I've done a rant review. I'm gonna put it down. They have a whole religious order to fight beetles. They discriminate and see some people in this society as the evil guys because they can heal themselves. Like, the worst kind of monster she could come up with is a beetle, and the discriminated population in these are people that can heal themselves and therefore are evil. And I understand, playing on prejudices, and now, some prejudices are based on things that actually, they're not really evil, and so, it's just playing on prejudice if you want, but I mean, come up with something better. You can't have me reading 500 pages and then the ultimate, the final battle is against bloody beetles. And finally, also, I must say, the characterization, everything that is in there didn't work for me. There is a point in a battle where they stop everything because, like, a bold friend of her gives her a elastic band to tie their hair, and she says, you're bold, you don't need elastics, and she just goes, oh, I go around with elastics in my pockets just if my friends need them. That's how tastelessly the author shows us a friendship formed in this book. Just to, like, you know, this is a dialogue that, you know, is gonna tell us, oh, now they are friends. That's the best you could do? Just stop a battle to get an elastic band when you're bold? That's how you tell me they're friends? Anyway, like, no. That's a debut. That should have never been a debut. Should have been just, yeah, shouldn't have seen the light of day. I'm sorry. And now we have come to the final 3. And these are, you know, the books that I consider a crime against society. Now, the number 3 spot, though, it's a book that I will even keep because I'm honestly so disturbed by it that there is an element, there is part of my mind that admire how brave this woman must have been to just go to the publisher with this book and just say, here is what I wrote. And they published it. And so on us, you know, just Eva who loves literature and loves horror, I understand why a lot of people love this book. I'm gonna go kind of make my case on why I think this is a crime against society. So I have Exquisite Corpse at number 3. Now, Exquisite Corpse is basically the story of his serial killer. He is kind of, imagine Dahmer, okay? Dahmer, who has been in prison now in UK, and then one day he's presumed dead. So he's sent to the morgue, and in the morgue he comes back to life and escapes. And then he moves to USA, where he, by a series of events, finds another Dahmer, like if Dahmer had a twin, and they fall for each other and they go on this path of finding the perfect body. So these are 2 men, serial killers, that rape, kill, and then eventually eat other men. And I'm fully aware that this sits in the horror genre, and I'm fully aware that this takes inspiration for real, you know, true crime serial killers. I understand all that. I understand why, you know, people that love horror, they will praise these and, you know, they'll say this is one of the most disturbing things I've ever read. 100%. I was disturbed. And I'm also probably someone who took this the wrong way because I really don't like to read about rape scenes and, you know, this kind of sexual content over and over and over again in my books. Like, I think this kind of explicit violent sex really bothered me personally, so that wasn't for me. Fair enough. But that is also why I think it's a crime against society, and because there is like a lot of evidence in scientific research, psychological research, that shows how, you know, violent pornography is, you know, one of the triggers for then violent behaviors in certain people. So a book like this that basically shows you a lot of rape, a lot of horrible violence, to the point that I've never read and probably never will read something so graphically violent and atrocious in a sense. What do you get out of this? Like, if you're a normal human being, like I like to think of myself as someone who's not depraved, doesn't have any kind of that sort of mental health illness, like I read these, I'm absolutely disgusted. I put the book down and I just say, oh, well, they say that women can't come up with such horrific things as men can. They're wrong. This woman did, because this is Poppy, she's a woman. And she, wow. But I was just disgusted. Like, basically, I was just like, I don't know, I'm not religious, but I feel like I need to go in a church and just cleanse my palate with holy water. You know what I mean? It was just like, that was the feeling I had. Disgusted, put the book down and just like, oh, okay. Someone who has a bit of issues, this is not gonna help him or her, is it? Maybe because, again, I study psychology, so I come from that kind of school. I see this kind of violence and pornography and violence related to sex as very dangerous to just be available to the, you know, the general public. So that's why I think this is a crime against society. I think this might send the wrong message, or inspire fantasies, or inspire people that are already up to no good or having issues to do even worse, if it makes sense. So yeah, I don't think this should be for public consumption, I'll be really honest. And I know I read horror, I love horror, and you know that might apply to a lot of books I read, of why. But that one, because of its association with real studies, real case studies of, you know, violent pornography, that particularly bugs me, that particularly makes me wonder why. At number 2, we have Gothikana. Now, up until October, Gothikana was my worst read of the year. Now, Gothikana is the story of this girl. She is now left on her own after her mother passes away, and as last message that her mother leaves her is basically go to this dark academia school where, you know, you're gonna be able to stay there, live there and learn, because she's kind of some sort of divination power, so it's like not properly a witch but sort of. So she goes there and she falls in love with this professor, and this is basically an abusive relationship masked as a love story in this dark academia setting. When I read this, I was just finishing working as domestic violence advisor in a hospital setting, and so reading a book that actually tells young women or young men, whether it is, that, you know, being this kind of relationship is something to look forward to or is something exciting, it was, to me, truly appalling. Like, this is not subtle. Like, this is not even, not saying that, you know, subtle abuse or subtle, like, overpowering of young women, because it's very much older men than her. I'm not saying that the subtle one is okay, but this one even didn't try to be subtle, or didn't even try to kind of make you question, is this abusive or not? This was clearly abusive. It was abusive in your face, and it was something that this protagonist sometimes even realizes how horrible this man is, but also think, oh, because this man wants me, I'm the object of his desires, then I will go along with whatever he wants. For me, like, made me shiver. And I heard so many people praise this book and just say this is the best dark romance I've ever read, and I was just like, what the, like, this is self-published and it shouldn't be. Like, there is a reason why a publisher probably would refuse to publish this, because it's not okay. And considering that the audience for this book is probably young women or young men, you know, they are teenagers or young adults, they enjoy reading romances, and I guess probably they are in that age where, you know, they're still maybe not completely mature, they're still developing, they're still finding out what they love or not. Putting the idea that this kind of relationship is okay, that this kind of relationship shows true desire, that, you know, the way you make yourself lovable is by accepting these things, is so against everything I held as a belief, everything I held as a woman, as a professional. It goes against any kind of principle, ethics I might have. I never loathed like a male protagonist. I never found them more disgusting as a human being, like a predator. The power dynamics in these are so evident, and I don't understand why the author could think that this was okay. I honestly don't know how she could not step back, reread what she had written, and realize that she had just depicted an abusive relationship, but like very abusive. And I was just like, it just gave me a headache just thinking about these guys. Like, I'm horrified that this book is there out for consumption. Has been also publicized on BookTube as, you know, awesome dark romance. No, like, get away from that book. It gives you a very wrong message. And a lot of people have, you know, done videos of how certain books are problematic or whether. I can assure you that the majority of books you have read that you found problematic were not as problematic as this one. So, not nearly as problematic as this one. Any popular book, I mean, popular YA. This was horrifying. And at number 1, I think it's a bit of a theme where I found the content so disturbing, like in Gothikana, but even not worse, because I don't want to put them, they're not on the same plate, they're as awful for different reasons though. So at number 1, because while Gothikana, the writing was bad, but that was not the main issue, I had Firefly, which is a book I read for, you know, when I was reading the books you suggested the most disturbing you had ever read. I'll link down that video. This didn't have any redeeming quality. Like Gothikana, if I have to think about one thing aesthetically, it was very pretty. This one was just horrible. Like the writing was appalling. The horror wasn't there. the monster wasn't basically there, and the problematic content this had for, I don't know, 600 pages or something of the sort, if not more, was just mind-blowing for me, the fact that this was ever published, that I just, yeah, this one deserves first place. Firefly is the story of these bunch of characters that have to fight this creature that hunts, kills humans. You can't see this creature, but you will only find the bodies that are basically kind of like everything has been sucked out of them, and you just find skin or something of the sort. So you start with the mystery. This guy who basically manages the territory, the house and territory surrounding it, of this rich guy. So he's kind of like the guard of this place. So he's just on a patrol and he finds this body, and then other people get involved. Now this guy, first of all, there are especially like 4 characters in these, and so you got police officer and another woman lawyer kind of sort of figure that works for this rich guy that owns the house, the guard of the house, and this random woman who is basically married to this dickhead and has a son who's also dickhead, I can remember of, and she gets involved because the next bodies that they found are on her property, around their property, so she kind of have to team up with the others. What she ends up doing is, because she's a risk, she's putting the rich guy house with a guard. And I don't care if I'm spoiling this. Now, honestly, trust me, you don't want to read this. And they kind of, you know, get on with each other as the cop and the lawyer do. Now, where to even start? So, the guard is a guy who doesn't pee inside the house. He pees only outside on the plants to give them nutrition, to give them water. And the girl, you know, that has gone now to live with him, finds this particularly touching and caring of him. And so, yeah, this is the kind of couple they are. Everything is related to sex in this book, like everything. This monster is related to, you know, something sexual. Everyone is just horny all the time, and they just get together with each other for no reason whatsoever, like it doesn't make sense. And then this girl, so this woman actually, that, you know, her son and husband are the dickheads. So she, how do I put this? She, as a child, as a 5 years old, had a relationship with like a 40, 50 years old guy, and she initiated it because she wanted to feel like a real woman. And I'm just, so basically there was pedophilia in this book, and the fact that at the end the author felt like he had to put a note to explain his motivations, because a lot of people guess what, they criticized him for his content, and he put out this note that made the whole thing 1,000 times worse. And I'm not quoting directly because I don't remember exactly, and I literally throw that book in the bin. Like, that's the only book in my whole life I throw in the bin. I was not gonna be responsible to donate these and for someone else to read this shit. Like, I wasn't gonna be held responsible for that. Even like my conscience just said, no, you have to throw this book away, although, you know, I never and will never probably throw a book away in my whole life. But that one deserved it. So basically he makes these notes in the end, and he describes pedophilia as something that is, he puts it like, is maybe a perversion, but it's harmless. Yes, he did say harmless, and also goes ahead and just say we have bigger problems in the world than this one. Just, you know, do what you want with that sentence. I personally throw a book in the bin. That's how I dealt with it. And yeah, so there is this woman, this guard, they make no sense. They are the most dumb people on earth I've ever read about. Like, honestly, together they couldn't come up with one neuron. Like, no, I think they didn't have it. And then you got this lawyer that has this very violent ex-husband that finds her, rapes her vividly, because we are shown that, again, very violent rape scene. And then a few days after, not even that, she just goes and, you know, hookups with the cop who's married. And just to show how dumb they all were, At one point they decide that they need to hide the bodies, so they need to get rid of the van, so they want to take out the van full of bodies, they want to take it out from the property. And so they do that, and then they just leave it out there, and so the police finds the van and the bodies, because duh, and then they're all in trouble. And I was just like, this makes no sense. Like, I was reading this, I was like, I kept reading, because I wanted to stop so many times, but I was just, first of all, doing a reading challenge. So when I do a reading challenge, I kind of feel responsible for not giving up on the book, but also I just couldn't believe what I was reading. You know, when you read, because it's so bad that you can't even think that this is actually happening. It was an experience, like it was an like out-of-body experience of the most horrifying things I've ever read in my whole life, probably. It's definitely probably at the top. So yeah, that is it, guys. Let me know, what are your worst reads? Again, if you're new, I would love for you to subscribe, so please hit the button down below. As you can see, I have some strong opinions on books and I'm not afraid of sharing them. Let's chat in the comments down below. Take care of yourself and I'll see you next time. Ciao!